A Child is Born, A Beginner's Guide to Nativity Stories by Amy Jill Levine. This is Chapter 4, Jesus, Heir to Traditions, pages 92 through 99. Being Righteous. Stories in the Old Testament / Tanakh do not withhold listing the flaws of their characters. Abraham lies by omission in telling both Pharaoh and Abimelech that Sarah is his sister and not his wife. He fails Hagar and Ishmael in agreeing with Sarah to expel them. Rabbinic sources paint Amram, Moses' father, as dooming the people to extinction by insisting that the men divorce their wives and therefore conceive no more children. Elkanah, the most sympathetic of the lot, finds himself replaced by the priest Eli. And Manoah? Sigh. Manoah. In comparison, Joseph is splendid. Matthew chapter 1 verse 18 notes that when Mary had been engaged to Joseph, but before they lived together, NRSVUE, the Greek literally means came together and likely connotes before they engaged in marital intimacy, Joseph discovered Mary to be pregnant. While Luke gives us lots of details concerning timing, for example, in noting that Mary would have been 3 months pregnant when she returned to Nazareth from visiting Elizabeth, Matthew does not. Perhaps Joseph discovered the pregnancy in that 3rd month, when he and Mary celebrated their wedding and were about to do what married couples do. He knows she is pregnant, whether because she told him or because he could see what, at 3 months, others could not. Matthew chapter 1:19 states, her husband Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, planned to divorce her quietly. Only he and Mary know why Joseph would seek a divorce. The reference to divorce sends me back to those earlier stories, and I see what I missed the first time. Abraham could have divorced Sarah for failing to give him children. For the same reason, Manoah could have divorced his wife, and Elkanah could have divorced Hannah. They did not. We can only speculate why, and that they loved their wives, as Elkanah clearly did, seems to me the best answer. Hagar and Mary. While Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptizer, fits alongside Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Mrs. Manoah, Hannah, and the great woman of Shunem as an infertile wife, Mary does not. The comparisons help us see her rather as connected on several levels to Hagar, the first woman to experience an annunciation, the first woman to name God, the first woman to accept the divine announcement, both that her son will be extraordinary and experience not only rejoicing, but also pain. In Luke 1, the angel speaks to Mary, who is engaged but is not married to Joseph. The engagement would likely put her in her late teens. Her age, fertility, and marital status remind me of Hagar, young and fertile, and in a relationship to Abraham that is both his wife and also still enslaved to Sarah. She is a wife, but not quite. She is pregnant not on her own suggestion or initial volition, but because another wanted her to become so. Sarah places Hagar into Abraham's bed. Gabriel tells Mary what God has planned for her. The term handmaid is absent in the NRSVUE, but it appears 40 or so times in the King James Version, frequently in reference to enslaved women. Its first appearance concerns Hagar. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children, and she had a handmaiden, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar, Genesis chapter 16, verse 1. In several cases, these handmaidens are placed by their female owners in the bed of the owner's husbands. Today, when we think of the 12 tribes of Israel, we recall Leah and Rachel. We should also think of Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, who is the mother of Dan, yes, Samson's tribe, and Naphtali. We should remember Zilpah, Leah's handmaiden, who is the mother of Gad and Asher. Ruth, a Moabite migrant laborer in Bethlehem, describes herself to Boaz, the landowner, and the best catch in Bethlehem, as his handmaiden, Ruth chapter 2, verse 13, and then chapter 3, verse 9. That she also will maneuver him into marrying her adds nuance to the term. In 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 13, Bathsheba, the wife of David, uses it as a self-description in her attempt to ensure that her son Solomon would accede to the throne. All of these women and their children are part of Jesus' family as well, whether in the direct line from Joseph, so Ruth and Bathsheba, or as part of the extended family. In the King James Version translation of Luke's Gospel, the term handmaid or handmaiden is Mary's self-description. Following Gabriel's announcement, Mary responds, "Behold the handmaid of the Lord. Be it unto me according to thy word." Luke chapter 1, verse 38, King James Version. The NRSVUE gives the more prosaic, "Here am I, the servant of the Lord." The Greek is doule, slave. Terms such as handmaid or servant sound nicer than slave. They also help remove God from being understood as a master in the sense of one who owns slaves. Mary, of her own free will, accepts her role as the mother of Jesus. Only free people in the Bible designate themselves as slaves of God. The expression can be one of complete freedom, since it indicates that no human master controls them. It is also one of complete dedication, because in antiquity, enslaved people were expected to know what their masters were thinking and act according to this will. Thus, some people today find it helpful metaphor. Others will reject this identification. Knowledge of the horrors of slavery, awareness of slavery or enslavers in one's own genealogy make the metaphor even more problematic. Thinking about Mary in relationship to Hagar may help in the conversation about how the term functions. Granted, they are very different. Mary is a Jew and Hagar an Egyptian. Mary is free and chooses the designation of enslaved. Hagar is enslaved, but by running seeks her freedom and by expulsion gains it. And yet, when we meet them, both are comparatively young, unmarried, but by contract, members of another's family, women, and childless. Neither asked to be the mother of the child they carry. Both, in comparison to so many other mothers, have no difficulty in conceiving, both receiving angelic annunciations that describe what their sons will accomplish. Both Mary and Hagar exult in their pregnancy. Hagar comes to recognize her own worth when Sarah becomes light in her eyes. Hebrew, a pun, like she's of less worth but also physically lighter, as Hagar is getting more and more heavy through pregnancy. Mary proclaims that God has looked with favor on the lonely state of his servant. Greek, doule, slave. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. Luke chapter 1, verse 48 through 49. Read in connection with Hannah and stretching the grammar a bit, Luke can be understood as depicting Mary as naming God as well. Mary proclaims that God has come to the aid of his child Israel in remembrance of his mercy. Luke chapter 1, verse 54. Aiding a child is what Hagar does first for her son, and then what God does for Ishmael, who is threatened with death in the wilderness, and then Isaac, who is threatened with death in the land of Moriah. Both Hagar and Mary are told that they are to name their sons. Both will suffer as their sons suffer. Hagar fears the death of Ishmael in the wilderness, and according to John's Gospel, Mary stands by the cross as her son dies. Both will receive and thrive. Their stories do not begin with the conception of their sons, and they do not end when the sons enter into their own fates. Hagar finds a wife for Ishmael in Egypt, Genesis chapter 21, verse 21. And in Midrashic lore returns to Abraham. Intriguing is the mention in the Bible of a group called the Hagrites, 1 Chronicles 5, Psalm 83, verse 6, where they are placed in connection to the Ishmaelites, Edomites, and Moabites. We can understand this group as the descendants of Hagar. Acts chapter 1, verse 14 locates Mary in Jerusalem among her son's followers, and later legend, Christian Midrash will continue to develop her stories. In the parable of the sheep and the goats in Matthew 25, Jesus states that he is present in any person who is hungry or thirsty, naked or imprisoned. We might see Hagar and Mary as present in any who are pregnant and alone, expelled from home, or otherwise in need of compassion and resources. Hannah and Mary. In 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 11, Hannah demands that God look on the affliction, Hebrew, ani, Greek teponoisis, of thine handmaid, Hebrew amah, Greek doule, remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but will to give unto thine handmaid a man child. King James Version. The NRSVU translates the misery of your servant. To reinforce this identification of enslavement, Hannah says to the priest Eli, Count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 16, King James Version. Finally, in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 18a, Hannah begs Eli, Let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. In Mary's Magnificat, Luke chapter 1, verse 46 through 55, the handmaid is connected with taponosis, affliction, humiliation, just as it is with Hannah. Mary speaks of the taponoisin, tes doules, which the NRSVUE translates, For he has looked with favor on the lowly state of his servant, Luke chapter 1, verse 48. Hannah and Mary use exactly the same self-description. The King James Version, inconsistent with its earlier translation, offers low estate of his handmaiden. Hannah and Mary speak of themselves not as servants but as enslaved. Mary does not call herself a servant. That would be in Greek diakonos. She self-identifies as one enslaved, Greek doule. The connections help us find the nuance in both terms. In both cases, Hannah and Mary, free women, identify themselves. Hannah is not enslaved. She is a woman married to a relatively wealthy, polygynous husband. Mary is not enslaved. She is a woman engaged to a scion of the house of David, who cares for her enough to marry her and raise a child not his own. Hannah describes herself as enslaved to God in the hopes of conceiving a child. Mary's self-identification comes when she is already pregnant. The juxtaposition helps us think about both how we see ourselves in relationship to God, enslaved, a servant, disciple, child, friend, lover, and when we use these relational terms, petitionary prayers, thanksgiving prayers, laments. Whether this is a metaphor useful today is, as we have discussed, a difficult question. The connection of enslavement and oppression/humiliation also connect us to the Exodus generation, and so to Moses. The Egyptians seek to humiliate the Israelites, not only by enslaving them, but also by dehumanizing them, by deliberately increasing their pain, both physical and psychological, by ordering the killing of their children at the moment of birth in front of their eyes. When Mary continues, God's mercy is for those who fear him, from generation to generation, Luke chapter 1, verse 50, we are reminded of those midwives who feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live, Exodus chapter 1, verse 17. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families, Exodus chapter 1, verse 21. Their names, but not that of Pharaoh or the other Egyptians, continue through the generations, as Mary proclaims that God has come to the aid of his child Israel, Luke chapter 1, verse 54. Again, we are reminded of those who, throughout the generation, served as the divine hands to rescue rather than to kill. The connection of Mary to Hannah was already noted in the documents of the early church. The Proto-Evangelium of James names Mary's mother Anna, which is the same name as Chana in Hebrew, or Hannah. As Hannah dedicates her son Samuel to the shrine of Shiloh, so Anna dedicates her daughter Mary to the temple in Jerusalem. The story of Hannah influenced the depiction both of Mary and of her mother, just as the story of Samuel in the shrine at Shiloh, with Eli as his new foster father, anticipates the story of Jesus in the Jerusalem temple, going about the matters concerning his father.